we can. Each man must do his bit.
Welcome to another edition of The Public Interest. My name is David Granger, and on this series of programs, we examine issues of interest to the Guyanese public at home and in the diaspora. And at this time of the year, Christmas is universal. It is not a national issue. And I would like to discuss something which is important to Guyana as a community and to Christians as members of that community, and the influence that Christianity had on my community, that is the Republic of Guyana. To some extent, it can't be total, but at Christmas time, I think we should remember the work and the words of people who helped us to be where we are today. And I feel that, at least I speak from people in my age group particularly, but maybe people older and certainly some of the people who are younger, most Guyanese who were born by the middle of the last century are likely to have attended a primary school administered by a Christian denomination, or they lived in a rural or urban community that was part of a Christian parish under a priest or a pastor. By the time I was 11, I had gone to 4 schools run by Christians. I started off at St. John the Baptist Primary School, an Anglican school in Bartica. And then I attended Auckland Church. It was then called Church of Scotland School. Of course, the Church of Scotland later became the Presbyterian Church, I believe. But it's now called Auckland Primary School. And then when I came to Georgetown, I attended the Moravian School and Moravian Primary School. And then I went briefly to the Sacred Heart Roman Catholic School. So before I got into secondary school, I was in 4 primary schools, but I went to 4 Christian denominations. And it was quite an experience. You know, it gave me an exposure to the different Christian denominations, and it gave me an idea of the complexity of the work that Christians were doing in Guyana. And of course, my own church, where I was baptized and confirmed and married, and which I attended when I was living in Georgetown, was Christ Church, which has its own parish. So it was very important to understand the nature of the relationship between Christianity and the community. And from my own upbringing, it was unavoidable. You knew the church was there. You knew the school was there. You looked out of the church, you see the school. You look out of the school, you see the church. They're almost in the same compound. In Moravian, it was, I mean, you can literally throw a stone from the school to the church. They're very close together. So church and school went hand in hand, but also church and community went hand in hand. In Guyana, the Christian church has played a pivotal role in promoting village life and in providing opportunities not only to evangelize, to win converts, but also to educate and empower villagers and other residents. Protestants pioneered Christianity in Guyana. That is a historical fact. Over 200 years ago, it was what you may call Protestants who engaged enslaved Africans during that dark period of enslavement. The Protestants were the ones who stepped forward. In particular, Guyana is indebted to the London Missionary Society, which first sent a mission in the early 19th century to spread the gospel, to evangelize the enslaved Africans, particularly. It catered for planters who had a Christian conscience, if that doesn't sound to be a contradiction in terms, because they all had slaves. But the LMS, the London Missionary Society, was actually supportive of the Congregationalists. The Congregationalists were not synonymous. The Congregational part of the society. And of course, we inherited in Guyana the Congregational Church. And you may say that the Congregational Church inspired the enslaved Africans. It inspired the village movement. And it has been a constant support to particularly the African Guyanese villages, for over 200 years. It is phenomenal. It gives the Africans a feeling of dignity and self-worth, self-esteem. In Guyana, the Congregational churches are old, old. And when I say old, I am talking about, 100 years old or 50 years old. And sometimes most of them are still wooden. And you can tell what happens when some of these wooden structures get old and start to decay. For example, Mission Chapel Congregation Church in New Amsterdam, Albion Chapel in Parish, really. It's called Albion, but it's really in Parish. Freedom Congregational Church in Stewartville in Region 3. Ebenezer Congregational Church, also in Region 3 at Denamstel. Smith Memorial Church in Brickdam in Georgetown. I don't know if you can call it the mother church, but it's certainly, they don't use words like cathedral, but it is certainly the premier congregational church in the country. Arundel Congregational Church, I think it's in Buxton, or French Buxton perhaps, and Ebenezer Congregational Church in Anns Grove. You must be careful because the congregations sometimes have two churches with the same name, Ebenezer. Obviously, Ebenezer was one of their favorite prophets. All of them are over 150 years old. So you can see that the presence of the Congregational Church is nothing novel, but it's old. Congregations are old friends of African Guyanese. And they bequeathed, apart from the actual conduct of services, they bequeathed a tradition or an example of religious tolerance and social independence. Because they have no bishops. Every congregation, that's why it's called congregational. Every congregation is autonomous. And I think that sense of autonomy translated into or moved into the village movement and the erection of villages, in which they were proud of their autonomy. And I think one of the foremost leaders, or one of the pioneers of the village movement or the local government in Guyana was a Congregationalist, chap called Curry, from MacDonald Curry, from I think he's originally from Denamstel. But he was regarded as the father of local government in Guyana. McFarlane Curry. And in a way, you can say that he became what he was because of his congregationalism, that he had a certain attitude to how society, a certain belief in how society should be run. And one of these occasions, when we deal with the companion program, the Nancy Webb Education, we'll deal with the life and work of McFarlane Curry. But right now, we look at the contribution of Christianity to the community as a whole. And as I said, the example of the Congregationalists is without historical comparison, frankly, although I'm not a Congregationalist myself. Protestant churches came at different times. The first one to come was really the Moravians, but very little is known of the Moravians. Although I attended a Moravian school, I was not aware of the depth of Moravian doctrine until much later. They came to what was then Berbice Colony, even before the United Colony of British Guiana was founded, under the title of Unity of Brethren. And they came to Berbice, which was then a Dutch colony, since 1738. That's before the 1763 revolt. So you can see how long the Christians have been coming here. But of course, they weren't allowed to evangelize the enslaved Africans. And of course, after the 1763 revolt, which is in Berbice, it was in the Berbice revolt, it sounded the death knell of Moravian missionary work in Berbice. And in fact, after the revolt, they disappeared for a while, and they didn't come back to British Guiana until 100 years later. And by that time, they set up a mission at Graham's Hall. I think the school that was constructed, the present school at Graham's Hall, was probably founded by the Moravians. And of course, the one I attended in Georgetown, the Moravian Primary School, Comenius Moravian Primary School, it was called then. But there've been many other so-called nonconformist or Protestant churches in Guyana. We've had the Adventists, Seventh-day Adventists. We've had Baptists. We have Lutherans, Methodists, Presbyterians, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and there are several other evangelical and Pentecostal churches all over the country. It's not my aim today to list all of them, but all I'm saying is that the Christian presence is pervasive in Guyana. And they made a tremendous, ineradicable contribution to education. The Christian church was in the forefront of providing religious teaching and general education, especially to the non-European population. Of course, it was very risky for some of them, and unjustifiably, John Smith, who was mistakenly called the Demerara martyr, the fact that he died and he was arrested and died in prison, I suppose, qualified him for martyrdom, but he didn't lead anything at all. But it is felt that his work on the East Coast Demerara was a contributory factor. And when these catastrophes occur, people always look for a scapegoat. And John Smith essentially was a scapegoat. But that's not the point. The point is that the churches, the Christian church, were so deeply involved in the community that the teachings of the Christian doctrine undermined the foundation of plantation slavery, the enslavement of man by man. And I suppose honest priests could not teach anything other than that. That slavery is just unchristian. It's just wrong. It's just sinful. And in any event, apart from the alleged role of Christians in the 1823 revolt, the Demerara revolt, the church did establish schools to provide both religious and secular education to Africans before, during, and after emancipation. And very often, church and school were co-located. In my own experience, as I said, I attended 4 religious schools before entering secondary school. And in each one of them, you could look out the window and see the church. Look out Bartica window, you see Bartica School. Look out Alkaline Church of Scotland School, you'd see Church of Scotland across the road. Look out of the Moravian School, you'd see Moravian Church. And of course, Sacred Heart School was in the compound, which is still Sacred Heart compound. So the co-location sent a message that the church and the school were together. They were not separated. And it's very convenient for villagers because it meant that, there were so many churches that they had the parents knew where their children were when, they didn't have to travel uh, to distant places, distant villages to go to school or to go to church. Children were educated very close to their homes. And I think in some places, some of the older African villages particularly, the number of churches in the village, is phenomenal. There are many, many churches. Of course, because they made of wood, some of them have started to decay. When you move from primary schools, you see that the Christians were also in the forefront of secondary schools. And I often refer to the Six Sisters, and they set up, these were the schools, and they're still the six best secondary schools in the country. Of course, you may dispute the fact that they're the best, but over all of them are over 100 years old. The St. Stanislaus College, St. Joseph High School, St. Rose's High School, these were all set up by the Roman Catholics, all over 100 years old. Queen's College, set up by the Anglicans. Bishop's High School, set up by the Anglicans. Borby's High School, established by the Presbyterians. And these six schools, the Six Sisters, all represent Christian involvement and Christian contribution to education in this country. The link, the connection is undeniable. I feel that the Christian church is owed a debt by the community, even though in 1976, many of them lost their role as managing some of these schools, public schools, in a more secular sense, because of course Guyana is a multiracial, multi-religious society, and there was some uneasiness, well, maybe worse than uneasiness. People felt that Hindus and Muslims ought not to go to schools with Christian names where the doctrines of Christianity were taught, and sometimes teachers felt that they had to be members of that particular denomination to be appointed in the school. But after 1976, things went in a different way, sometimes not always for the best, but that's where we are today. Congregationalists in particular were in the forefront, and they led the way in establishing churches in many of the free villages after emancipation, and sometimes creating what you may call a clergy of local deacons, and helping to mentor local leaders. And up to the early days of mass politics in Guyana, many priests used to get involved in party politics. I don't know that it has ever really disappeared completely. And I know up to the mid-60s, you could go into some churches and you could hear the priest speaking, very warmly about supporting certain political parties. So there's always been this nexus between church and politics in Guyana. For me, it's more important that the church should be regarded as a fountain of social cohesion. And it is something that I believe, given my own age and experience, that Guyana still suffers from a lack of social cohesion. And if the churches were to actually follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, I think they would pay more attention to the importance of social cohesion, because it's consistent with the Christian ideal of promoting harmonious social relations. Diversity is everywhere present. I mean, Guyanese can't claim to be exclusive anymore, although some people try to hold beliefs which disparage other beliefs that they don't agree with. Um, in schools, offices, factories, diversity is prevalent. And when we speak of social cohesion, we mean a policy or a practice which involves creating a moral community that is safe and secure for everyone. It offers everyone opportunities for improvement of the quality of life. And social cohesion involves promoting cooperation um, among groups, among families, among races, among ethnic groups, among social organizations, promoting trust among citizens, and fighting against exclusivity and marginalization. And there's still now in Guyana a lot of tension um, among people who try to create exclusive groups and try to exclude people whose ideas they don't support. We could achieve a greater measure of social cohesion by promoting a sort of non-confrontational way of resolving differences, not always by violence and demonstrations and riots, but by providing spiritual comfort to those in need, by healing emotionally wounded, especially those who have been victims of violence, like those school children on the 6th of March in West Berbice in Region 5, whose buses were stoned by PPP rioters. Um, Events like that, you need counseling, social cohesion, not by the victims, but by the assailants, because they're the ones who were throwing the stones at the buses. Uh, Social cohesion can help in protecting the vulnerable from malice and injustice, and by restoring religious, ethnic, and gender harmony. And Guyana has been distinguished and maybe distinctive in that we have not really had any serious religious differences. People, you can go to a village or a community and see a masjid there, you can see a mandir there, you see a church there. But it doesn't mean every day, every Friday after prayers, people come out, um, quarreling and fighting and rioting. It means that we are capable of living side by side in peace with one another. So, our concept of social cohesion, and I must say that this is one of the first year the APNU AFC administration was in office. On day one, we created a Department of Social Cohesion, and we maintained that department right up to the end of our tenure in 2020. We recognized from the start that we are a multi-religious society, and we always will be. There was no attempt to suppress any religion and any culture. But we recognized that something more had to be done so that people can work positively and progressively towards a common good. And when you look around some Christian congregations, whether you're Anglican or Catholic or evangelical, you will see Africans, Amerindians, Chinese, Europeans, Indians, and mixed people. And these congregations are now emblematic of our diversity over the decades. There was a time when you could go to some churches and only see one ethnic group, but it doesn't happen anymore. It doesn't happen anymore, at least in my experience. We see that social cohesion promotes greater inclusion, which is what we need in Guyana. It promotes harmony. It diffuses tension resulting from cultural differences. It promotes respect for differences. which could threaten trust, mutual trust between groups, and sometimes, unfortunately, it could degenerate into antagonism. And it promotes a sense of belonging for people who feel exclusive or used to feel excluded or marginalized in mainstream society. And we rely on Christian churches to give support in our far too frequent catastrophes, particularly flooding. Salvation Army, particularly, was prompt, in response to that so-called great flood. It's not so great. It's notorious flood of 2005. And of course, the two worst floods we had, the Salvation Army stepped forth to provide relief to the victims of the flood, 2005 and 2021. Anglican and Methodist churches have hosted free medical outreaches, providing free spectacles, medical supplies to citizens. SDA, Seventh-day Adventists, partners with Food for the Poor to provide houses, to build houses for poor families. And some denominations, particularly the Catholics and the SDA, Seventh-day Adventists, have actually built hospitals. St. Joseph Mercy is a Catholic hospital, and Davis Memorial is an SDA hospital. Founded by Christian churches. My friends, there's no doubt that Christianity has changed the complexion and quality of life in our country. They're not begging for favors. It is what Jesus Christ taught them to do, to succor the poor and the homeless. And we are part of the Western Hemisphere. And regardless of our ideological beliefs, we have been impacted by Christianity. I mean, the whole concept of holidays is a Christian concept. Holidays means holy days. So when you celebrate Christian holiday, Christmas, Christian holiday of Christmas, it is very Christian. When you celebrate Easter, our Good Friday, these are all, reflections of our Christianity. And in fact, even in our school system, we still speak, I don't know still, but in my day, we used to speak of Easter term. Well, maybe Hindus and Muslims might agree with the term. It's Easter and it's Christmas term. It just shows you the historical impact of Christianity in our community. It has also played a role in our community by imparting certain, not imposing, imparting certain practices. Definitely, our primary education system is a creature of Christianity. Our secondary education system, although it is now more diverse, is also a creature of the Christian church. Hospitals and foster care institutions, like in St. Vincent de Paul, have been created by Christians. Emphasis on charity. All these are manifestations of Jesus' work on earth. Christianity has helped to place a greater focus on children. Well, every country in the world, every society in the world knows about the importance of children, but certainly in Western civilization, there is a special place for the child, whether or not that reflects, the child Christ who came into this world on what is called Christmas Day, but the status and the importance of children and parentage, whether or not we identify with the roles of Joseph and Mary, these are all benefits of the so Christian civilization, if you want to call it that. And to some extent, the emphasis on sexuality in, uh, in man-woman unions, whether they're married or not, um, has been built on the historical rubble of adultery and prostitution and promiscuity. But I think Christianity has tried to move sexuality away from those historical conditions: adultery, promiscuity, and prostitution. All I'm saying is, I'm not suggesting that they're valuable or invalid, but all I'm saying is that Christianity puts, sexuality within a certain context. My friends, the Christian church has made an indelible contribution to Guyanese community, regardless of your own personal beliefs. Christianity is inescapable in Guyanese society. Anglicans, Baptists, Lutherans, Methodists, Presbyterians, Roman Catholic, whatever the denomination, contributions have been made to education, to economic emancipation, and to community development, and to the health and well-being of our children. In this Christmas season, we celebrate the contribution of Christianity to the Guyanese community and our people. Happy Christmas to all of you.